Tell us about that. The film footage, what
Well,
was the deal with Wilhelm Reich? Apparently the government had a axe to grind with that guy.
Yeah, well, he was looking into stuff, you know, and he was doing time-lapse photography for one thing, and in the time-lapse photography over his laboratory, you can see flying saucers and the constellations passing by while the flying saucers make blurbs like this all around. So he was getting time-lapse photographs, and he thought these were extraterrestrial ships, and he was going to the government to tell them about them. And he didn't realize he was sticking his head in the meat grinder because you know, they didn't like it at all. They considered him subversive, and he was trying to do his duty as an American citizen, you know. And at one point, they were filming his use of the cloudbuster to eradicate a bad cloud of deadly orgone energy, DOR, D-O-R, and he was using his cloudbuster, and the cameraman was behind him, and he and a couple other people were up there using the cloudbuster, and this was near a body of water and some trees, and there was this dark cloud, and he was eradicating. You see the cloud actually being wiped away by this cloudbuster, and inside the cloud was this flying saucer, and they were pointing the antenna, which is basically what this thing was, at the saucer, and the saucer just started going down, and it went down, and they got excited and took off running, and somebody knocked over the camera, and that was the end of the film. But I actually saw that at a theater, and I was really surprised that...
And how do you feel it got into the theater in the first place?
Oh, I think they filmed it, they boxed it up, they shipped it out before the government even knew the film existed, and by that time people had already seen it, but you'll never see it again. Certainly they retrieved that
They
film.
didn't have that kind of electronic intelligence that they have now.
Now you can't do anything like that and get away with it. It goes through the postal, and they scan it. Mm-hmm. They can scan letters. They use microwaves. They scan everything in the letter. Even though it's folded up, the microwave device actually unfolds the letter, reads it.
How about that?
Even in foreign languages.
You don't see that on the Discovery Channel.
And they scan it for certain words and stuff, and that technology was in existence in 1969. And the microwave can distinguish between different layers of paper, you see, and then unfold the whole thing. This all happens in nanoseconds, you know. And meanwhile, in 1957, the U.S. Air Force had a scanner that could scan Pravda, translate it, and print it out in English in 2 hours, 1957.
And it becomes the L.A. Times.
Yeah. Yeah. And how could they do that in 1957 when
That's
the
pretty
public
impressive,
didn't have that technology until about 5 years ago, you know?
That's right. Of
So
course, it goes back to what we were saying about...
technology theft and concealment.
Right. Getting back to World War II briefly, just to finish up, of course, if we are to take into account a stalemate between the Nazis and the Americans at this point, what are we to believe about our old nemesis, Adolf Hitler? You make some claims about him.
Well, people have taken me to task on it, but I honestly don't believe anybody could look that much like Hitler as the man I saw in San Antonio in 1967.
Explain that a little.
And, well, I was selling paintings with my friend on the San Antonio River. I was sitting in the amphitheater. The Arneson River Theater was just across the San Antonio River, and I looked down the walk, and there came a man and a woman. The man was wearing a suit that was a kind of a raw umber color, and or rather, yeah, it was raw. It was a yellowish mustard color, which was one of Hitler's favorite colors, by the way. And I could see that surgery. I could see marks on his face that surgery had been done here, but it didn't affect it. He still looked like who he was. And he was limping, and his pants were too short. That was another thing. He had a habit of wearing his pants too short. And the woman with him had dancer's legs, and she had red hair, and she was a little taller than him. And they came down the walk, and I said, just before this, though, there had been a couple of guys in suits who came up there and went through where we were and talked to us, engaged us in conversation. And they were both electrical engineers from Kassel, Germany.
Huh.
And
That's
I thought, this is interesting. So then these German engineers went on by and then looked down there, and I nudged my friend and I said, look who's coming down the wall. And he said, oh my God. I didn't even have to say. He knew who it was. And I said, look who's coming down the walk, you know. And I said, I didn't want to attract too much attention. I had on sunglasses, and I said, he's going to pick up that painting right there. And I knew he was going to pick up that painting, and he did pick it up. And then all of a sudden, these German, quote, engineers got his attention, and then he looked up, and he went, and he put the painting down, and they hustled off.
And then what year was this? What year?
1967, when Hemisphere opened.
Oh, interesting.
And then a couple of more, quote, engineers, electrical engineers from Kassel, Germany again, came by and debriefed us and went on with the entourage.
Must have been some kind of tour bus let off there.
Yeah, Hitler was visiting his relatives in Fredericksburg. He had relatives there. He had an uncle there. He had other relatives, yeah.
That's
and as his old uncle told my uncle, he said, Ach, und dat Adolf always was a troublemaker.
Yeah, that's the understatement of the century. Now, you want to explain to us your contention about how Hitler might have escaped? You know, because everybody's bringing up these ideas about bone sample, you know, his teeth, his skull. You know,
we had the intelligence photos that the Russians furnished us right in our library when I was in Air Force Intelligence, and they had a picture of the guy they were saying was Hitler. And he was shot in the head, and he had attached earlobes. He looked just like Hitler, but he had attached earlobes. And I said, that's not Hitler. And these guys said, you know, that worked with us. I said, why not? I said, look at his earlobes. He's got attached earlobes.
Yeah. It's well known that Hitler had over 100 body doubles for all different purposes.
Yeah, he had 5 main alphas. And they would often be in the parades, and they're not even sure that some of them didn't give some of the speeches that he supposedly gave.
That would be interesting.
And that way he could be in more places at the same time, too. You know?
Sure, that would be a media
everybody could say they
stunt.
met the Fuhrer and touched him and stuff, you know. The thing about it is, here was 4 or 5 bodies that looked like Hitler found around the bunker. When you know,
why is that when Hitler, if you got 5 of these
what do you need so many lookalikes dead, you know? Now, the body that they claimed was Hitler that was burned, okay, that was Goebbels and his wife. They never found Goebbels' body. They never found his wife's body. They found all his children's body in the bunker, all dead.
Now, here's an
But why didn't they find Goebbels or his wife's bodies? Because they were the ones that were burned, and you can take one look at that corpse and know it's Goebbels. You got that Egyptian beak nose, you know, and it's not Hitler, you know. And
I'd like to get to Hitler's escape. This is an interesting contention about Hannah Reich. Explain that to us about how this was, because, see, the reason I'm interested in this is that if you look at the conventional literature about the fall of Berlin, it will tell you that there were hundreds of airlifts being, going in and out of there, even while the place was burning down. Are we to believe that Hitler was so insane he wouldn't, hey, let's take a ride in a plane, let's get out of here?
If that was Hitler's body they found, the Russians
further.
could produce the DNA evidence to prove it, because they took those bodies to Russia.
Yeah, and you went a little further with your with how you felt he escaped.
They had a pad built on top of the bunker, and it had direct access from Hitler's room on the very bottom. And all he had to do was go right straight up a set of stairs to the top, and there was a pad, a landing pad that could only be used by a helicopter or flying saucer. And they had one of the top test pilots, Hannah Reich, along with Hans Ulrich Rudel. Now, Rudel was considered to be the successor to Hitler. And, I don't know whether you ever saw his combat record. You familiar with it?
Personally.
Fantastic, unbelievable. He personally destroyed, on the Russian front, over 300 Russian tanks.
Holy smokes.
He had a missing arm, and he managed to fly this way. I mean, he just couldn't be stopped. Hitler tried to get him to come back to Berlin, and he refused. Right to his face, he refused, and then Hitler gave in and said, "Go ahead, a real warrior, So he went back and fought to the very end. But here's Rudel in Berlin, visiting with Hitler along with Hannah Reich, He was two of the top pilots. I mean, this guy Rudel was phenomenal.
Absolutely. This again
he was shot down 38 times.
That's
and
impressive. Again, this is in the open literature about Hannah Reich, for instance, was in the bunker. I mean, you have one of the premier pilots of Germany with Hitler.
And the Russians admitted they didn't get Hitler's body.